Okinawa holds a unique place in military history, not just for the battles fought on its soil, but for the supernatural encounters reported by American service members stationed there since 1945. Of all the overseas postings in the United States military, Okinawa consistently ranks as the most haunted location, with documented reports spanning 8 decades. But what if the ghosts and apparitions weren't the only entities American personnel encountered on this blood-soaked island? This is the story of Operation Night Fox, a classified incident from 1968 that the Department of Defense has never officially acknowledged. To understand what happened in 1968, we must first understand the ground itself. The Battle of Okinawa, fought between April and June of 1945, remains one of the bloodiest conflicts in modern warfare. Over 12,000 American service members died during the 82-day campaign. Japanese military casualties exceeded 110,000, with fewer than 8,000 soldiers surrendering. The civilian death toll remains disputed, with estimates ranging from 40,000 to 160,000 Okinawan citizens, potentially more than a third of the island's population. Many civilians died in acts of mass suicide known as shudan jiketsu, driven by fear of American forces or direct orders from Japanese military commanders. Others were caught in the crossfire between two armies fighting for every inch of territory through tunnel networks, fortified caves, and fortified positions. The island's soil became saturated with violent death. In Japanese spiritual tradition, such concentrated trauma creates onryo, vengeful spirits bound to the location of their deaths. But the Okinawans also believed in older powers, entities that predated human conflict and observed humanity with ancient, calculating eyes. Among these were the Kitsune, the fox spirits. Before we continue, understanding Kitsune mythology is essential to what follows. Throughout Japanese and Chinese folklore, foxes have been regarded as supernatural beings of extraordinary intelligence. The kitsune's power grows with age, manifested physically by the number of tails it possesses. The oldest and most powerful kitsune possess 9 tails and command reality-altering abilities. Upon reaching 50 to 100 years of age, all kitsune gain the ability to shapeshift. Their preferred form is that of a beautiful young woman, though they can assume any human appearance. Japanese folklore historian Ue Kasal documented that the fear of kitsune became so deeply embedded in Japanese culture that people avoided traveling alone at night, particularly near graveyards or forests, for fear of encountering a fox in disguise. Kitsune fall into 2 categories. Zenko, or celestial foxes, serve the Shinto deity Inari and act as benevolent guardians. Yako, or wild foxes, are tricksters or malevolent spirits. These darker kitsune are said to possess humans, a condition called kitsunetsuki, driving them to madness, illness, or death. Some legends speak of kitsune that feed on human life force, draining their victims slowly through intimate contact. Others describe foxes that can bend time and space, create illusions indistinguishable from reality, or drive entire communities to madness with their supernatural screams in the night. The people of Okinawa believed these entities had inhabited the Ryukyu Islands for thousands of years, long before human settlements. And in 1968, something disturbed them. In January 1968, Marine Corporal Michael Santos arrived at Camp Hansen on Okinawa. The 22-year-old from California was part of a logistics unit scheduled for deployment to Vietnam within weeks. Like thousands of young men before him, Santos spent his off-duty hours exploring the local establishments that catered to American service members. One particular club near Kin Town became his regular haunt, an upscale establishment known among Marines for its exceptional hospitality and attractive hostesses. Unlike other bars where the staff spoke broken English and showed obvious bruises or skin problems, this establishment employed women of extraordinary beauty who spoke fluent English and bore no visible imperfections. According to Santos's later testimony, he noticed something unusual during his third visit. Despite the club's popularity with American service members, no local Okinawan men ever entered the establishment. When he asked one of the hostesses about this, she dismissed it as a matter of the club exclusively serving American military personnel. Santos also reported experiencing vivid dreams after spending evenings at the club. Dreams of walking through snow-covered mountains with women whose faces he couldn't quite remember upon waking. Each time, he would wake in his barracks with no memory of how he returned to base. Other Marines began reporting similar experiences. More troubling, several men started calling in sick with a mysterious wasting illness. They complained of extreme fatigue, disorientation, and a persistent sense that something was draining their vitality. Camp medical personnel documented these cases but could find no physiological cause for the symptoms. Then, Marines started disappearing. The first official disappearance occurred on January 28, 1968. Lance Corporal Robert Hayes failed to report for morning formation. A bed check revealed his personal effects remained in the barracks, but Hayes himself was nowhere on base. Military police checked the sign-out logs. Hayes had not officially left Camp Hansen. 3 days later, Private First Class John Morrison disappeared under identical circumstances. His squad mates reported he had been experiencing the same wasting symptoms as others, but he had seemed recovered the day before his disappearance. He was last seen heading off base toward Kin Town. By mid-February, 7 Marines had vanished. The pattern was consistent. All had frequented the same upscale club, all had reported vivid dreams, and all disappeared without leaving base through official channels. The Naval Criminal Investigation Service launched an investigation, but their efforts were hampered by jurisdictional complications. The club operated in a legal gray area, licensed by Okinawan authorities, but protected by certain influential local families with complicated wartime histories. NCIS investigators who attempted to search the premises were stonewalled by both club management and, surprisingly, certain Okinawan police officials. What NCIS didn't know was that Corporal Santos had begun his own investigation and had made contact with someone who understood what was really happening. Santos's turning point came when he noticed an elderly Okinawan man watching him from across the street as he waited in line outside the club. The elderly man wore traditional clothing and carried himself with the bearing of a former soldier. When their eyes met, the old man gestured for Santos to follow him. Against his better judgment, Santos left the line and followed the man to a small family restaurant tucked into a narrow side street. The interior smelled of miso soup and grilled fish. The elderly man led Santos to a private booth and ordered tea without asking what Santos wanted. The old man introduced himself as Takeshi Nakamura, a former Imperial Japanese Army soldier who had survived the Battle of Okinawa. He had spent the past 25 years trying to atone for what he and his unit had done to Okinawan civilians during the battle. Now, he explained, something far older and more dangerous than wartime atrocities was taking revenge. Nakamura spoke carefully, knowing how insane his words would sound. The club, he explained, was operated by Kitsune, fox spirits who had lived in the Okinawan hills for centuries. During the Battle of Okinawa, a Japanese artillery position had been established near their den. The constant bombardment, fire, and poison gas killed several young Kitsune and driven the survivors from their ancestral home. For 23 years, the Foxes had watched as foreign soldiers occupied the island, building permanent bases on land soaked with blood. They had learned American customs, learned English, learned how to move through human society. And now they were taking payment for what had been done to them, draining the life force from young American servicemen through a process that slowly, inevitably, killed their victims. The missing Marines, Nakamura explained, were already dead. The Foxes kept their bodies in tunnels beneath the club, old Japanese defensive positions from the war. By the time a victim was taken below ground, the Kitsune had already drained them to the point where survival was impossible. The dreams Santos and others experienced were the Foxes feeding, entering their victims' minds while they slept, sustaining themselves on human vitality while creating beautiful illusions to keep their prey returning night after night. Santos's first instinct was to dismiss the old man as delusional, but Nakamura had details, specific descriptions of the hostesses that matched perfectly, knowledge of exactly which Marines had disappeared, and a warning about which service members would vanish next. That night, Santos returned to his barracks and checked on his squad mate, Lance Corporal David Chen. Chen looked terrible, pale, gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. When Santos asked if he'd been dreaming about the club, Chen's face went white. He described the exact same mountain landscapes Santos had been dreaming about, the same beautiful women, the same inability to remember how he got back to base. Chen confided that he felt compelled to return to the club every night, that he couldn't stop thinking about one particular hostess, that she appeared in his thoughts during the day like an intrusive memory he couldn't shake. He was afraid, but felt powerless to resist. The next morning, David Chen was gone. Santos made a decision that could have ended his military career. He contacted Nakamura and proposed a plan. They would enter the club's basement and find evidence of what was happening. If they discovered bodies, they would contact NCIS and Japanese police simultaneously, creating enough pressure that neither agency could cover up the incident. Nakamura tried to dissuade him. Confronting Kitsune directly was suicidal. The Foxes could create illusions that would turn Santos's mind against itself, could move faster than human eyes could track, could rip through flesh with claws sharper than any blade. But Santos was a Marine, trained to confront danger, and he'd lost too many friends to walk away. They entered through the kitchen during the pre-dawn hours when only cleanup staff remained. Nakamura had obtained a key from an old contact, a cook who'd worked at the club for years and harbored his own suspicions about the establishment. The kitchen connected to a root cellar, and the root cellar concealed a trapdoor. Below the trapdoor lay tunnels, old Imperial Japanese Army defensive positions that had been expanded over the past 2 decades. The smell of earth and decay filled the passages. Santos carried a flashlight and a service pistol he'd smuggled off base. Nakamura carried a Tonto knife blessed by a Shinto priest and a bag of salt, traditional protections against malevolent spirits. They found the first body 30 meters into the tunnel system. Lance Corporal Hayes, missing for 3 weeks, sat slumped against the tunnel wall. His body appeared mummified, skin drawn tight over his skeleton, lips pulled back in a grimace of terror. The flesh had a strange gray pallor that Santos had never seen on any corpse. They found 6 more bodies in the next chamber, all displaying the same desiccated appearance. Some wore Marine uniforms, others wore older military clothing. Nakamura identified them as U.S. service members from the early 1950s based on their uniform details. The Kitsune had been hunting for far longer than anyone suspected. Then they heard the singing. The voice came from deeper in the tunnel system, a woman's voice singing a haunting melody in Japanese. Nakamura's face went pale. He recognized the song as a traditional folk tune from the Ryukyu Islands, one that hadn't been publicly performed in decades. Against Nakamura's whispered protests, Santos moved toward the sound. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, a natural cave that had been incorporated into the Japanese defensive network. Paper lanterns provided dim illumination. In the center of the chamber sat a woman of extraordinary beauty, wearing a traditional kimono, her long black hair cascading down her back. Santos recognized her immediately. She was one of the hostesses from the club upstairs, the one who had caught his eye on multiple visits. But here, in the dim lantern light, he could see what he'd missed before: the slight fox-like shape to her eyes, the way her shadow seemed to flicker with multiple tails, the sense that her beauty was somehow too perfect, too symmetrical, as if it had been consciously designed rather than naturally developed. She stopped singing and smiled at Santos. Her voice carried no accent whatsoever as she spoke. She welcomed him by name, told him she'd been expecting this visit, and explained in calm tones exactly what she and her kind had been doing. The Kitsune colony had existed in Okinawa for over 600 years. They had watched human empires rise and fall. They had observed the Ryukyu kingdom, seen the Japanese annexation, witnessed World War II devastate the island. Throughout all of it, humans had treated the land with casual cruelty, destroying without thought for the spirits and creatures who had called this place home long before human arrival. During the Battle of Okinawa, she explained, her 3 children burned alive when American flamethrowers cleared the cave system where they sheltered. She had been forced to watch from a distance, powerless to save them, as her offspring screamed in the inferno. For 23 years, she had planned her revenge. She learned American English by listening to radio broadcasts. She studied American customs and preferences. She mastered the art of creating perfect human disguises. She recruited other displaced fox spirits. There were many on Okinawa who had lost their homes and families to the war, and together they established the club. Americans came willingly, eagerly, never suspecting that the beautiful women who entertained them were draining them slowly, feeding on their life essence until there was nothing left. It was justice, the Kitsune explained, balance for what had been taken from her. Santos raised his pistol. The Kitsune laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the chamber, almost like a fox's bark. She asked what she thought bullets would accomplish against a spirit that had lived for 3 centuries. Then Nakamura stepped forward and began speaking in rapid Japanese. Santos couldn't follow the words, but he understood the tone. Nakamura wasn't threatening, he was negotiating. What happened next remains classified, known only through fragments of Santos's debriefing testimony that were later leaked through unofficial channels. Nakamura proposed a bargain. The Kitsune would stop hunting American service members. In exchange, Nakamura would use his remaining contacts and resources to establish a protected sanctuary in the Okinawan interior, land that would be legally preserved as a nature reserve, immune to military or civilian development, where the displaced fox spirits could live without interference. The Kitsune regarded Nakamura with ancient eyes. She pointed out that he was human, that humans broke their promises, that she had no reason to trust any bargain offered by the same species that murdered her children. Nakamura's response was simple. He offered his life as collateral. If the sanctuary was not established within 1 year, or if it was later violated, the Kitsune could claim him. More than that, Nakamura revealed something he had kept hidden for decades. During the Battle of Okinawa, his unit was responsible for forcing Okinawan civilians into a cave system before sealing the entrance, leaving over 200 people to suffocate in the darkness. He had lived with that guilt for 23 years. If the Kitsune wanted genuine justice rather than mere revenge, his life was worth far more than the young Americans she had been killing. The chamber fell silent, except for the flickering of paper lanterns. Finally, the Kitsune spoke. She accepted Nakamura's terms with two conditions. First, the sanctuary must include the specific hillside where her den had been destroyed. Second, the club would remain operational for exactly 1 more month, giving her time to ensure all her kind have safe refuge before the hunting stopped. Santos objected. Another month meant more potential victims. The Kitsune's eyes flashed gold in the lantern light as she turned to Santos. She explained that Santos himself had already been marked. She had been feeding on him for weeks. If he interfered with the bargain, she would finish draining him before dawn. His only chance at survival was to stop visiting the club immediately and accept the compromise Nakamura had negotiated. Santos asked about the Marines who were already missing, the ones whose bodies lay in the tunnels. The Kitsune's expression didn't change as she stated those men were already dead when she brought them below ground. She fed on humans for weeks before taking them to the tunnels. By then, they were empty shells, barely clinging to life. She had given them peaceful deaths in their dreams, better than they would have received if their condition had been left to run its natural course. There was nothing more to negotiate. Nakamura bowed deeply to the Kitsune, a gesture of respect between equals. Santos holstered his pistol. Together, they left the tunnels and emerged into the pre-dawn darkness. What happened over the next month remains murky. According to official records, NCIS investigators received an anonymous tip about possible criminal activity at the club. When they executed a search warrant, they found the tunnel system and the bodies of 7 missing Marines, along with the remains of 12 service members from earlier decades. The official explanation stated that the club had been operated by a human trafficking ring that drugged service members and robbed them, occasionally resulting in accidental deaths. The hostesses were arrested, the club was shuttered, and the case was classified due to its potential to embarrass the Department of Defense and complicate U.S.-Japanese relations. No trial ever occurred. The arrested women vanished from custody during transport to a Japanese detention facility. The transport officers reported that their vehicle passed through a stretch of road near a forested hillside, and when they arrived at their destination, the prisoner transport was empty. An investigation found no evidence of escape. The vehicle's locks were still secured from outside, and there were no signs of forced exit. The official conclusion was that the transport officers had been complicit in allowing the suspects to escape, and they were court-martialed. Both men maintained until their deaths that they had no memory of the prisoners disappearing, only a vague sense of time having passed differently than it should have during that particular stretch of road. Corporal Santos received a medical discharge 3 months later for undisclosed health reasons. His service records note treatment for severe anemia and exhaustion, conditions that mysteriously resolved shortly after the club was raided. He returned to California and never spoke publicly about his experiences on Okinawa. Takeshi Nakamura disappeared in early 1969. His family reported that he had left home one evening, stating he needed to visit an old friend and never returned. Search efforts found no trace of him. Some months later, a land preservation initiative was quietly pushed through the Okinawan prefectural government, establishing a protected nature reserve in the hills northwest of Camp Hansen. The reserve remains protected to this day, and locals report that foxes are frequently seen in the area, despite foxes being relatively rare elsewhere on Okinawa. The official story satisfied no one who looked closely. NCIS investigators privately questioned how a human trafficking operation could have gone undetected for decades, or why the alleged criminals would keep bodies in tunnels beneath their establishment rather than disposing of them. Medical examiners noted the unusual condition of the corpses, extreme desiccation, inconsistent with any normal decomposition process, but their observations were classified. Marines stationed at Camp Hansen in subsequent years reported that certain areas near the old club location became known as places to avoid after dark. Service members walking alone near the forested hills reported feeling watched, seeing yellow eyes in the darkness, and hearing sounds like fox cries that seemed to carry an almost human quality. In 1973, a Marine corporal filed a report claiming he had encountered a beautiful woman on a trail near the nature reserve. They had talked for nearly an hour, during which she spoke perfect English and seemed to know details about his life she couldn't possibly have known. When he attempted to exchange contact information, she had smiled and told him that Americans were no longer welcome to hunt in these hills, but they were safe as long as they respected the boundaries that had been established. The corporal looked away for a moment, and the woman had vanished. His squad mates found him standing alone on the trail at dusk, disoriented and unable to account for nearly 3 hours of missing time. The report was filed under mental health observation, and the corporal was transferred off-island shortly after. Whether the events of 1968 truly involved supernatural fox spirits, or whether there was a more mundane explanation that became embellished over time, remains a question without a definitive answer. The documented facts are these. 7 Marines disappeared from Camp Hansen in early 1968. Their bodies were found in tunnels beneath a civilian establishment. The suspects vanished from custody under impossible circumstances, and a nature reserve was established shortly after in an area with no obvious environmental significance. What makes Okinawa's supernatural reputation so persistent is the sheer volume of similar accounts spanning decades, reported by military personnel from different generations with no connection to each other, describing encounters with entities that match Japanese folklore with disturbing consistency. Okinawa remains the most haunted location in the U.S. military, a place where ancient spirits and modern warfare created something that defies simple explanation. The island's history, soaked in blood, occupied by foreign forces, home to displaced entities whose existence predates written history, created conditions where the boundary between the natural and supernatural became dangerously thin. The Kitsune of Japanese folklore are patient creatures, accumulating power over centuries, waiting for the right moment to act. If the stories are true, then what happened in 1968 was not an isolated incident, but a warning. Respect the land, respect the spirits, and remember that humans are not the only intelligent beings with long memories and a capacity for justice. Marines still serve on Okinawa today, walking the same ground where their predecessors vanished without explanation. The club is long gone, demolished and rebuilt as civilian housing. The tunnels were officially sealed in 1969. The nature reserve remains protected, its boundaries clearly marked, its wildlife thriving. And on certain nights, when the wind moves through the hills and forests near Camp Hansen, service members stationed there report hearing sounds that might be foxes calling to each other, or might be something else entirely, reminding the temporary occupants of this island that some territories belong to powers far older than nations or empires. This has been Warpath Memories, bringing you the stories that soldiers carry home but rarely share. If you found this account compelling, hit that like button and share this video with anyone interested in military history, Japanese folklore, or unexplained encounters. Drop a comment below telling us about your own experiences with the supernatural during military service. Every story deserves to be heard and preserved. And if you want more deep dives into the supernatural side of military history, subscribe to Warpath Memories and ring that notification bell. We publish new content every week, exploring the encounters that official reports can't explain. Until next time, stay vigilant, respect the unknown, and remember, some shadows have teeth.